Ladies and gentlemen, in less than 15 minutes, we will open the first online space law and policies international conference, Russian Outer Space Talks. We will conduct it online, in a video conference mode, in cooperation with our partners. For effectiveness of our joint work, we are asking you to follow simple rules. Make sure that you have stable internet connection with at least 2 megabits per second bandwidth, and try to avoid other traffic consumers for the same channel. If you have an unstable connection, please reduce quality or turn off your device camera. In case the connection is interrupted, please restart conference by restarting your browser. For a stable operation, we recommend to use Google Chrome browser. If you plan to join our conference from your mobile device, please download EVA VCS app in Google Play or App Store and use a handset for speaking. Please keep your microphone switched off while not planning to speak. We wish you to have a fruitful conference. Ladies and gentlemen, in less than 15 minutes, we will open the first online space law and policies international conference, Russian Outer Space Talks. We will conduct it online, in a video conference mode, in cooperation with our partners. For effectiveness of our joint work, we are asking you to follow simple rules. Make sure that you have stable internet connection with at least 2 megabits per second bandwidth, and try to avoid other traffic consumers for the same channel. If you have an unstable connection, please reduce quality or turn off your device camera. In case the connection is interrupted, please restart conference by restarting your browser. For a stable operation, we recommend to use Google Chrome browser. If you plan to join our conference from your mobile device, please download EVA VCS app in Google Play or App Store and use a handset for speaking. Please keep your microphone switched off while not planning to speak. We wish you to have a fruitful conference.
Hello, colleagues. Let me express my gratitude for your participation in the conference, and let me introduce our speakers. Mr. Michael Gold, Acting Associate Administrator for International and Interagency Relations of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Mr. Sui Hunlan, Secretary General of the China National Space Administration. Mr. Matthias Link, Director of International Affairs and Space Resources of the Luxembourg Space Agency, Ministry of the Economy of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. Giuseppe Ribaldi, President of the Moon Village Association, Executive Secretary of the Hague Space Resources Governance Working Group. Mr. Hambolani Mudau, Chief Director of Space Science and Technology of the Department of Science and Innovation of the Republic of South Africa. Mr. Alexei Dronov, Deputy Director of the Legal Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Mr. Nasser Al-Rajdi, Director of National Space Policy and Regulation of the UAE Space Agency. Mr. Keiji Kitamura, Director of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency Moscow office. And here in studio, myself, Vasily Godnov, I'm Head of Division of Multilateral International Relations, and Mr. Anatoly Petrukovich, Director of Space Research Institute of the Russian Academy of Science. In addition, some universities in different parts from the Russian Federation will join us in discussion and prepare, I hope, some comments and questions for us. Thank you. And now, dear colleagues, I would like to propose you short recommendations. If you would like to comment the speech or statement of our colleague, you just press a button of your microphone and you could raise a hand so we will know you have something to add or something to comment. And now, please, we put some introduction video for better understanding the goals and main goals of our conference. So please, I ask your attention.
The term space resources could be applied to a wide range of resources of any kind found in situ, both natural and anthropogenic, including raw materials, minerals and volatile substances, as well as orbital and other spatial and timing resources, radio spectrum and electromagnetic fields, solar energy, radiation of any kind, and elementary particles. The main criteria for this definition is how space resources could be used for the benefit of all humankind. It is agreed that an international regime and procedures have to be set up as far as extraction and utilization of such space resources is about to become feasible. While the uses of orbits and radio frequencies are regulated by norms of international law, the international legal regime for exploration, exploitation, and use of minerals and other raw materials which could be found on celestial bodies remains uncertain. However, it is already not a pure science fiction, but a nearby future. The goals of the conference are the following: to promote knowledge of the legal framework applicable to the exploration, exploitation, and use of mineral space resources, and draw attention of the authorities, decision makers, and public to topical issues of progressive development of space law in this field. To increase public awareness of the existing and possible challenges and threats in the area of such activities. And to promote international cooperation in space-related legal framework. The participants are welcomed to share their views on the present and future regulation mechanisms on both domestic and international level. Discuss and compare different existing proposals on legal models related to the activities in exploration, exploitation, and utilization of space resources. We do hope that the upcoming collaborative and fruitful discussion will be a ground for understanding of which approach is better and really serves the interests of all human beings without discrimination of any kind, on a basis of equality and in accordance with international law.
talk about one of the most controversial topics, legal aspects of recovery and use of space resources. The title of the event clearly explains our intention to hold an open discussion instead of official reports and statements. The main goal of this meeting is to ensure mutual understanding as the best way for fruitful international cooperation. We would like to exchange views on existing approaches, consider various proposals, and perhaps get some suggestions or even solutions for the further development of the international space regulatory framework. So you can get rid of your ties and speak only at your personal capacity.
Okay, dear speakers and guests, on behalf of Russian space science community, I would like to welcome you on this great event. We have now more than 100 connections already, mostly in Russian university and scientific and space organizations. In this era of coronavirus, the online format is the lucky opportunity to not only to preserve the former connections, but to establish new online formats and to meet online more often and reach our goals faster. Today's topic is exactly resources. However, before using something, we need to find this something, and moreover, currently we need to first to understand what we need in space. And here the science comes to the forefront. However, while the commerce is based on rivalry, modern space science is based actually on international cooperation. So it will be very instructive to hear the opinions on how we can merge the legal rules which will be valid, should be valid for both these two very different approaches, two fields of human activity. Thank you. And now we will start our presentations of our participants. Please, Vasily.
We have a welcoming speech from the Deputy Director General for International Cooperation of Space State Corporation Roskosmos, Mr. Sergei Savelyev, welcoming you to take part in this event.
Dear participants, today a lot of countries get involved in space activities, and we have to think about collaboration and development of partnership in space exploration. All space actors are seeking to increase investments and reduce costs. There is a view that space resources development would support commercial applications of space activities, produce economic return on investments, stimulate technological innovations, and contribute to economic growth. The term space resources has a broad definition, which includes various types of resources that are not limited to just raw materials. The unique environments in space, including gravity, radiation, and location, may also be considered natural resources. Nevertheless, for the moment, the discussions on legal aspects of exploration and use of mineral resources in space seem to be essential and most relevant. Several companies are pursuing efforts to access resources on the moon and asteroids for commercial gain. In the last few years, different legal novels concerning recovery and use of space resources were developed at national level of some countries. The only legal basis for such activities is provided by the Outer Space Treaty 1967 and Moon Agreement 1977. But there is still no comprehensive international legal framework for use of space resources. At the same time, there are no doubts that a specific legal regime for the exploitation of resources should be elaborated, overall through the United Nations, based on present international space law. All of us understand the role of international cooperation in the field of activities in the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, and the importance of developing the rule of law in this new area of human endeavor. For these reasons, the main purpose of our conference is to exchange views, present and consider various approaches to design legal mechanisms for exploration, extraction, and utilization of mineral space resources. I hope we'll hold a fruitful discussion on existing challenges in the area that could provide for better understanding and helping us to reach multilateral agreements and cooperation among various sectors in space activities in the nearby future. Thank you.
Dear guests, we have one more welcoming speech from our international colleague, Director General of the United Arab Emirates Space Agency, Mr. Mohammed Nasser Al-Aghbadi. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to contribute to this very important, dialogue about space policy. And I would like to express, my deep thanks to Roskosmos for their interest and for the opportunity. And also, we have a good, great relationship between United Arab Emirates Space Agency and Roskosmos. We cooperate in human space flight program. Our first astronaut, Hazza Al-Mansouri, and also we have one of key people in Roskosmos, Sergei Kirikolov. He's one of our advisors. We are looking forward to, of course, have more cooperation in different areas, including space policy and discussing, how can we make space more peaceful. Well, here in UAE, in United Arab Emirates, we have accomplished and completed our regulatory framework in terms of national space policy, national space strategy, and forward-looking space law that was issued last year. We also issued a kind of strategy for space investment promotion. UAE, probably you know that we are active internationally. We are a signatory of 4 international space treaties. We have participated in different working groups and also with COBOS, with different friendly countries, talking about how to make space accessible and also utilize it for the benefit of humankind. We will be committed to contribute to be part of all dialogues that can contribute to make space more safer. We are happy to engage in this discussion with my team. I think they are participating and will be around. We are also very proud that we have accomplished our regulatory framework. We are not only just in UAE now, but now we are promoting space activities in our region. United Arab Emirates launched an initiative to establish Arab space cooperation. This is where we try to bring more countries to the international space dialogue in different areas, including space policy and plus space projects and initiatives and programs. We will continue to do so, and with the help and encouragement and support from our colleagues and friends, people like you, we will achieve our goals. In fact, together we can go further, and of course we can go faster. I just need to probably highlight that this year, in spite of COVID-19 pandemic, there is a hope. United Arab Emirates launched its first mission to Mars, which called the Hope. And also adjacent and aligned with other missions to Mars, Perseverance, the US mission, and also the Chinese mission, Tianwan. Hope and perseverance, this is what we need in the light of COVID-19. We are grateful that we will pass together this difficult time, and we will become stronger, and we will do more good things in space for the benefits of humanity. Thank you so much again for this opportunity, and I hope that you get a fruitful discussion and also outcome that can be adopted to make life more accessible and a better utilization. Good luck, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Aghbadi. And we would like to present you the current issue relating to the exploration, extraction, and utilization of space resources in terms of international space law. We all are familiar that the term of space resources could include a different type of such things, including not only mineral resources, but the main goal of our conference, paying attention to the extraction and utilization of mineral resources of the celestial bodies, because there are a lot of initiatives on different national and international level related to this issue. So please, I ask your attention and we demonstrate the video.
The Outer Space Treaty in 1967 and the Moon Agreement in 1977 have a key role in sustainable, peaceful space exploration and mutually beneficial cooperation. Articles 1 and 2 of the Outer Space Treaty in 1967 make clear that the Moon and other celestial bodies are not subject to national appropriation, and they are free from exploration and use by the states in accordance with international law. The Moon Agreement of 1977, in turn, offers more details. In particular, Article 6 specifies the right to collect and remove samples and their use for support missions in appropriate quantities. Article 9 provides the right to establish stations. Article 10 establishes the obligations to safeguard and protect life and health of persons on Moon. Articles 2, 3, 7, and 11 provide the national management and equitable sharing of benefits derived from resources, with special consideration for interests and needs of developing countries and efforts of states that contributed indirectly. Unfortunately, there is no further explanation about an appropriate international legal regulation on space resources exploration and use. Nevertheless, the provisions of both documents contain neither restrictions nor the rules that exclude the possibility of exploitation of mineral resources by public or private entities. Yet, the Outer Space Treaty has 104 parties, while the Moon Agreement only has 16. Articles 2, 3, 7, and 11 provide the rational management and equitable sharing of benefits derived from resources, with special consideration for interests and needs of developing countries and efforts of states that contributed indirectly. Such analysis of existing international legal base just provokes more questions. At the same time, exploration, extraction, and use of space resources have a broad scope of terms of goals, objectives, responsibilities, interests, and priorities. That is why the legal aspects of exploration and use of space resources are increasingly becoming the subject of discussions at the international level. However, acceptable regulatory models are still uncertain. Due to existing gaps in the international space law, some states have already enacted their own national legislation aiming at provision for legal basis of such activity, including its commercialization for governmental and private sectors. A number of states has recently announced the same approach in order to develop a regulatory framework at the national level which ensures private space operators' rights. Those processes raise some doubts and concerns overall how these initiatives could affect the possibility to establish a common legal regime for exploration and use of space resources that could be recognized and adopted by the international community. Consequently, a wide range of questions have to be answered in the nearest future, designing technical, legal, and financial basis for exploration and extraction of space resources and possible institutional forms of international cooperation in this area. Therefore, the space community should be encouraged to shed light to the problems related to space resources exploration and utilization, consider various approaches helping to solve them.
So, dear colleagues, now I suppose you are familiar with the main threats were evaluated now in this video. And my first question I would like to address to Mr. Gold. Mr. Gold, why the executive order on the encouraging international support for the recovery and use of space resources has appeared right now? Is it really so urgent nowadays? And what is the main purpose of this action? Please, could you clarify?
So first, let me thank all of you for hosting this event. I appreciate Roskosmos, the Russian Academy of Sciences, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Let me say Dobry den, or Dobre Utra in my case. I appreciate the question and appreciate you bringing us all together, because whether it's the executive order or our own domestic legislation, the purpose of what we're trying to do is to take action now to prevent conflict later. As your videos and speakers have described, ISRU in situ resource utilization capabilities are going to be critical. Any successful era of exploration has depended upon the ability to live off the land and utilize resources. That's going to be as true in space as it has been here on Earth. It's going to be true for the moon, and even more so as we go forward to Mars. And we are doing those things together globally as a world. There's never been, as you mentioned, we had Mars Month with 3 missions to Mars. And there's never been more development, more activity on the moon, more missions since the Apollo era. And it's very important that we engage in this dialogue. The executive order, our own national legislation, and that of other countries is a beginning. But we need to engage in these conversations, which are so important, together, bilaterally, multilaterally at forums like COPUOS. But as also been mentioned in the videos, there's been a significant change since the Outer Space Treaty was signed in the treaties, which is the entrance of the commercial sector and private sector entities. And frankly, the international regimes, COPUOS, et cetera, we weren't set up to deal with that, which is why I'm so pleased with what Giuseppe Ribaldi and the Moon Village Association has done, as well as the precursor of the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group. And I applaud what Luxembourg did and other nations to support that, because it's important to bring the private sector to the table to also have these conversations along with governments. We've got a strong foundation, as has been noted in the Outer Space Treaty. And the executive order and everything else that the U.S. does will acknowledge that, will reaffirm it. And it's very important that as we build any new policies, as we look to the future, that we begin with this terrific foundation that we have with the Outer Space Treaty. We need to respect Article 2. We need to reaffirm the commitment there, as well as Article 1, as was mentioned, the free use and exploration. And again, talk about what this future can look like. This forum is a terrific example of the conversation that we need to have. And the more we talk, less likely there is to be any kind of confusion or conflict in the future, which is why, again, I'm grateful for everyone coming together, my fellow participants, to discuss this important issue. And I especially look forward to questions from the students afterward. So that is the purpose of the executive order, to provide clarity for the U.S. entities moving forward, that per the Outer Space Treaty, we can utilize resources, and to provide clarity to the international community that we will do so following our international obligations per the Outer Space Treaty, the Registration Convention, and other multilateral agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. I agree with you that we need such talking, because the mutual understanding is really what we need. But coming back to the text of the executive order, I could see that there is some statements like that Space Treaty, OST, provide to uncertainty regarding the right to recover and use of space resources, President Trump said. And another question about the applicable law, because in different parts of this executive order we could find this sentence that all entities under U.S. jurisdiction could act in accordance with applicable law. Previously, we could see an amendment including international obligations of the United States, but in this order, this amendment disappeared. So there is a view that taking or enacting such regulations at national level could provoke some difficulties elaborating in the future international mechanisms overall in UN platform. So I would like to ask our guests and participants and speakers, what do you think? Do you share this view? If anybody would like to comment.
I guess let me begin by commenting, or at least clarifying one thing. There's nothing in the executive order or no action that the U.S. is taking that is intended to any way dilute our commitment to the Outer Space Treaty, the Registration Convention, the Agreement to Rescue Astronauts, or anything else. I just want to be very crystal clear on that point. That legal foundation, as I mentioned, is critical. We respect that, and we'll be asking any partners, by the way, that join us on the Artemis Accords and other programs to reaffirm their commitment to the Outer Space Treaty, and particularly the provisions related to space resources, so that any future activities, public or private, are conducted in compliance and under the auspices of Article 2.
Thank you, Mr. Gold, for clarification. And I see Anatoly. I could pass the floor to Alexei Dronov, the Deputy Director of Legal Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Vasily, and I welcome wholeheartedly all the participants of our discussion. I'm really happy to be here and to attend this very interesting exchange of views. I hope that we will do it in a very creative and informal way. And there are indeed some big issues to be asked and to be discussed. And taking into consideration what just Mr. Gold said, and I'm very welcome his statement about the willingness and readiness to continue the dialogue, both on bilateral and multilateral level. I very welcome his reference to the COPUs, because you see, some days and weeks ago, I was very much afraid that these were mentioned by the representative of the United States. But now I see that this word is being mentioned, so it is a great thing. We hope that we will, without going into too much detailed discussion about modalities of the procedures, we would finally start our work within the working group to be established by the COPUs. Unfortunately, this COPUs now is under big question mark, the organization of the session, but we hope that we will continue this discussion. And beforehand, probably we might have the possibilities also to talk bilaterally and to discuss some matters where we really need Mr. Gold to better understand some elements of your position, national position, because as leading spacefaring nations, we really need to understand each other better. In this regard, we would like to refer to our statement. Minister of Foreign Affairs made a comment on this executive order dated the 7th of April. We tried to do this statement in a very balanced manner, Mr. Gold and dear colleagues. But there are some issues I would like to ask these questions, if with your indulgence. Yes. First of all, is my understanding correct that the U.S. government is going to further on build its policy, both on national and international level, on the principles and rules enshrined in the Treaty of 1967? This is my first question.
Yes.
I would just go probably through a short list, Mr. Gold. I'm terribly sorry. I apologize. In order to give you the ability to give us so more comprehensive replies to this, yes?
As you can see, we're eager to answer.
Excellent. Second question. We've heard many times about the so-called leading role of the United States in exploration and use of outer space.
and some elements of this political statement is being as well put to the paper, to the executive order. My question as a lawyer, does it mean that the United States by this is raising a legal claim to be the first among other states to decide about the future of the space? Is it a new element of your legal position, or it is just a political statement? Because this is a very sensitive matter. For the time being, as for now, we as Minister of Foreign Affairs, we do not have the grounds to state that the United States is breaching the treaty for this reason, because the treaty is quite clear about this. We are talking about equal cooperation, broad cooperation. This is a part of objectives and goals of the treaty. I'm far from thinking that you are so directly breaching the treaty. So my understanding of your position is that you are just explaining your say, the willingness to be on, so to say, in the first line of the process, but not to claim the leading role in formal legal sense. Third question, I would like to ask you as well. We do not have the description of what are the space resources. And trying to understand this concept, we could come to a conclusion that, as a matter of fact, we do not have a clear concept of this. Because you see, the resources is something we studied, and we realized that something can be used as resource for sake of our economies, projects, and so on and so forth. As for now, we do not have even technologies and possibilities to use something as resources. We can just study, we can collect data, we can form some basis for understanding what does it mean. But in this regard, another very conceptual question, very principal question, whether or not your government, and I would kindly ask also other participants to reply to this, somehow to comment on this matter, do you consider the space resources as a part of outer space? Because on some occasions we could think that this concept is quite different. So we have outer space, and after some actions are undertaken, we are getting a material or an object or something which is getting a part, by the way, of something which is object of property, of national jurisdiction, so on and so forth. This is a very sensitive matter. Fourth issue as well is, do we think really that, because this was a very strong point in the executive order, and I also would like to ask you about this. There was a very strong statement about the Moon Agreement. And it was said that this interrelation between the treaty, please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm wrongly interpreting the sense of the order. The interrelation between the Treaty 1967 and Moon Agreement 1979 is something which brings legal uncertainty. It's something which impeding the development of space activities towards space resources, and so on and so forth. In this regard, I would like to refer to our discussions we hold in the legal subcommittee of the COPIUS, where there was a very strong, very interesting seminar beforehand, and there was a very strong statements made by some experts and some delegations stressing that the Moon Agreement, and we, both of our countries, elaborated very hardly on this text, and this text has been adopted by consensus by the General Assembly of the United Nations. So it is something like very close to what we as a lawyer naming opinion juris, yes? And there was a very clear stated that this agreement is completely in line, is so to say, is something which is not in conformity with the Treaty in 1967. So my question to you is, what specific aspects of this agreement do you consider as a very problematic in terms of further using these elements for sake of establishing this legal ground? Or I don't know, a ground, because I know that some countries are not very much happy, so to say, with the idea to have a hard law regime in this regard, but at least some set of rules. And finally, a very important point. There was a very strange wording used in this executive order, which in my understanding, I am just expressing my personal opinion, is something which is a compromise mixture of different concepts taken from different documents. Because the executive order is criticizing and saying that the space is a very unique domain, is a very unique, so to say, sphere, but at the same time that you are not considering this as, I would try to quote, как там было сказано?
Not as a common.
Just a moment, excuse me. Yeah. Excuse me, please. That you cannot consider this as a global commons. The United States, I quote, does not view it as a global commons. We have different concepts. We have a concept of common heritage of mankind, which is set forth in some articles here on the Moon Agreement. We have the concept of common. Just a moment. Of province of all mankind, which is a very interesting point because the translation of this term is quite different in French, English, and Russian. The concepts are, it seems to me, are quite different. But this is a very important point because for us it is an indication that you have some doubts with regard to the space as a res communis. Because if you are moving towards amending this concept, you're considering this as something which may be explored and occupied. It is something which in our view is not quite in line, first of all, with Article 2, and something which really needs to be then discussed as a new approach on the global level before we try to do anything further on this specific point. My understanding is that we still on the concept of res communis, so it means in practical terms that the whole international community should participate in discussing and resolving matters relating to the, first of all, to the legal regime of this specific space and how to act on this specific space. And you are completely right, referring to all these very important principles of 1967 treaty, saying that it should be done in accordance with the international law, Charter of the United Nations, and so on and so forth. So we should consider this as a very broad and very constructive, indeed, political and legal context. Yes. In this regard, we are a little bit concerned, Mr. Gold, that recently we've got many information messages, both from open resources and officially as well, which are indicating that your government and your administration is using the concept of, we're talking about not about broad international cooperation, but we try to start talking about something where we have one part of international community doing well, and another part of international community, I would name those countries, 2 or more countries, not well. So it is something which we really very much prefer to not to sort of say to prevent the situation to be developed in this regard, because otherwise the whole system we established in the beginning of the 60s would be destroyed. This is our understanding, and this is a big point of concern. I'm terribly sorry to be so long in listing those questions, and I'm very happy to see you on the screen and to see our colleagues on the screen, because it is something where we really need to exchange views before we meet somewhere in Vienna and to continue our conversation. Because for the time being, we have a very important, very responsible, I would say, timing for further thinking about the future. Not only in terms of resources, frankly speaking, because the term we are covering a lot of issues directly or indirectly involving many other problems. For example, you mentioned some freedoms of using the outer space. But before we launch something somewhere, we should know that we have a secure area for this. In this regard, many questions as to the so-called space traffic, yes, how to better manage this, and this is also a global matter. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope that the list is for now is full enough, so to say, to somehow to inspire our further discussion. Thank you.
So let me just say, for you students in the room,
the whole list of our concerns, I suppose.
Not the whole. Not the whole. Just some part, but very important. Some very important ones.
Let me try and briefly address those, and let me say for you students out there.
I hope now you have written them down, and we'll be prepared to answer. But I would like to ask our participants, because I'm sure they have their own opinion as experts, and they have maybe the similar concerns or maybe different opinions.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Certainly. So, Mike, it's not necessary to answer right now. Maybe you need some kind of consultation, maybe some kind of supporters. But we have the opportunity. We will have a short coffee break during our conference, and after that coffee break, we have the opportunity to answer those questions we are able to answer. So, and now we have.
Ответить. Don't you want to give the possibility to answer?
Mike, if you would like to answer all questions.
I would love to answer. I need no coffee. I would love to answer. And for you students in the room, let me say this is what it's like being in an American law school. This is taking me back to my law school days. I get 5 questions that I need to write down or respond to. But all excellent questions, Alexei. You're a good professor. And let me begin with the Outer Space Treaty. And just to reiterate our strong and uniform support for the Outer Space Treaty. For those of you who are familiar with the U.S. Constitution, I very much consider the Outer Space Treaty like the Constitution, that it sets out a series of principles and obligations that are as relevant today as they were when it was executed in 1967. Outer Space Treaty is over 50 years old, doesn't look a day over 35, still a terrific foundation for everything that we need to do. And as some of you have heard me often talk about in international forums and conferences, NASA and the U.S. government is completely committed to our obligations under the Outer Space Treaty, as well as the Registration Convention and other multilateral agreements that we have entered into. And explicitly, whether it's the executive order or any other action that we take, is all being done in full compliance with the Outer Space Treaty. We believe that's very important, since those are the rules that are on the books. Those are the laws that we need to abide by. And particularly when it comes to space resources, the Outer Space Treaty lays out what we believe to be a very reasonable, rational, and constructive framework relative to free use, that you can extract and utilize resources, but you should avoid harmful interference, and that it's free access to all. These are all vital obligations and principles as laid out by the Outer Space Treaty, which we support. And again, as we move forward with the Artemis program, we are not only going to say that, but we are going to do it in actions and require any international partners that join us in Artemis to similarly reaffirm the Outer Space Treaty. And you mentioned sharing of goods, etc. We're also going to ask partners that join us to ensure that the world can benefit from what we do in space and what others do in space through the public sharing of scientific data. Another principle that's very important to us, not in the Outer Space Treaty, although we believe very much in the spirit of the Outer Space Treaty. So let me just be very clear on that point. Relative to the Moon Agreement, We have not signed a moon agreement. Russia hasn't. Numerous other countries hasn't. There are issues relative to the sharing of resources, regimes, issues that very much require additional debate, additional thought as we move forward. We're just at the beginning of our efforts. Now, it's very important that we abide by what's in the Outer Space Treaty, particularly as we go through ISRU, and that can inform what comes next. And that's why we're appreciative to participate in this dialogue, as well as further conversations in COPUOS to look at that, as well as other issues such as how we respect space heritage rights. Space traffic management, as you mentioned, is going to be very important to tackle on a global basis. So we very much look forward to engaging in terms of how we have those conversations. Relative to a global commons, as you mentioned, in French, in Russian, that term can have a lot of different meanings. It can carry with it a lot of different interpretations. And that's why we want to be very careful as we say something's a global commons, that we aren't then carrying restrictions or different views, etc., that could change the way one person views a global commons versus another person views a global commons. So the bottom line is, whether we're having the res communis debate, a discussion about the moon agreement and what's there, these are all topics that need to be discussed, should be discussed at COPUOS as we move forward. But again, we are launching missions to the moon. We're going to be conducting activities. Many other nations, including Russia, China, other nations, everyone is active in the space world. And that's why it's important we reaffirm, as I mentioned before, our devotion and our respect for the Outer Space Treaty, proceed underneath those auspices, and avoid conflict in the future. So let me stop there and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. You were very concrete. And Anatoly, you have a question?
Okay. Actually, I would like to switch to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Xu Hunlian, Secretary General of China National Space Administration. And my introductory question is the following. Actually, many people have the very different views on what are exactly space resources necessary for humankind. China is one of the leaders of the moon program, with the station on the back side of the moon, where we can find something really interesting. And so the question is, what is the specific Chinese view on what is the most important resource in the outer space now? Thank you. Please, Mr. Xu Hunlian.
Dear colleagues, it is my great pleasure to attend this online conference. Ever since our adventure and exploration to the outer space, such explorations have brought about economic development for the mankind and has made contributions to the promotion of the well-being of mankind. Outer space and outer space activities have become an indispensable and important part of modern human life. With the in-depth development of space activities and space applications, the challenges associated with security and development of outer space are rising, providing important opportunity for promoting global governance and cooperation in outer space. The exploration and use of outer space resources we are discussing today is also one of the hot topics. I would like to share with you some of my thoughts on the issue in the light of the development trend in international space law and China's practice in lunar and deep space exploration. First, the UN Outer Space Convention System has established a basic legal framework for outer space activities for the international community and a global governance framework for outer space, with the UN COPUOS as its main platform has been generally effective. The UN Outer Space Convention System, established in the 1960s and 1970s, has set up basic legal and regulatory framework for the outer space activities for international community. In particular, the basic principles established by the Outer Space Treaty has become the basic guidelines for all countries to carry out outer space activities. And taking the Outer Space Treaty as cornerstone, the UN COPIUS has formulated soft laws on issues such as space debris and nuclear power sources, thus making necessary supplements to the outer space rules and enriching and developing the basic order of the rules-based outer space activities. At the same time, the UN COPIUS has been in close relation with international organizations, civil societies, to provide a platform for dialogues and cooperation among member states in the field of outer space policy. Especially in recent years, the UN has keenly grasped challenges of the complementary activities of the peaceful use of outer space, establish a working group on the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. And after rounds of negotiations and consultations, we have come to the goal of highlighting the core role of the UN COPIUS in the global governance of outer space and fully demonstrating that the international community has extensive common interests and demands in the field of global governance and cooperation. Second, the growing demand for exploration and development of outer space resources has posed new challenges to existing and outer space legal framework system. And the establishment of relevant international systems needs the UN as a main platform for international governance of outer space. The exploitation and the use of such resources is a new problem that the mankind will inevitably encounter. The Outer Space Treaty does not contain any direct and specific provisions. Therefore, there are many disputes and differences in the interpretation and application of the relevant principles. As I know that there are discussions on legal issues related to the outer space resources. For example, the United States and Luxembourg have extensively introduced domestic legislation on the exploration and use of outer space resources, and the participation of private capital also calls for the establishment of an international mechanism for outer space resources as soon as possible. The principle of be free for exploration and use established in the treaty provides foundation of legitimacy for the exploitation and use of outer space resources by all countries. However, there is a need for serious, careful, and extensive discussions as to how we can conform to the boundaries set by the treaty. I'm convinced that the UN COPIUS and its legal subcommittee are the most appropriate platforms for discussing relevant legal issues and building international systems for outer space resources. Promoting the establishment of community with a shared future in outer space can provide a basic concept for the international system of outer space resources. The vision of community with a shared future in outer space is not only in line with the goals and purposes of the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit and interest of all countries, but also meets contemporary needs of protecting outer space environment. And third, China has implemented a series of projects in lunar and deep space exploration and has conducted useful exploration in space application and space science research. China is ready to work with international partners to promote the progress of the world's space industry. And as for our lunar project, China's lunar exploration project is steadily advanced through a three-step strategy of circling, landing on, and returning from the moon. Chang'e 4 successfully realized the first soft landing and patrol and exploration of a spacecraft on the far side of the moon in January 2019. Chang'e 5 will be launched to carry out the lunar sample return at the end of 2020. And in the future, the lunar polar region exploration and the lunar research station missions will be planned. In July this year, we also have successfully launched its first Mars probe Tianwen-1, launching China's first Mars exploration mission. The international space cooperation is an important way to realize the peaceful use of outer space. For example, in Chang'e 4 mission, we've carried out such foreign payloads from the Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, Saudi Arabia, and shared probe data and research work. Our future lunar and Mars exploration projects will more reflect the principles of openness, transparency, sharing and mutual benefit. We are willing to strengthen international exchanges with other countries in the basic research on the basis of equality, mutual benefit, peaceful and inclusive development. My dear colleagues, while posing new challenges to the order of international outer space activities, the exploration and use of resources provides an important opportunity for the continuous upgrading of global governance and cooperation in outer space. We hope that our countries will build a common vision and take common actions, uphold with the UN COPIUS as platform, give considerations to both free use and shared interest, and ensure space resources activities benefit all countries and people, especially the developing countries. China has always been committed to the common progress and long-term sustainable development of the mankind's space industry. The lunar and deep space exploration is growing rapidly. China hopes to see more and more international cooperation based on equality and mutual benefit, and is willing to work together with all parties to contribute to the realization of the vision of a shared community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunlan. And it's a very interesting statement, and we expect we will join our efforts on UN platform, overall in legal subcommittee, in scientific and technical subcommittee, and in COPIUS itself, to reach not only understanding, but to create a truly international mechanism for such kind of activities, based on your experience as well as on the experience of all other experts from different countries, without any discrimination. But not only in the United States took some steps toward the new regulations of such kind of activities. On August 1917, the Luxembourg, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, enacted a law on exploration and use of space resources, entered in force, and a bit later there is an advice made by Luxembourg Council of State. And in this advice, also cast doubt on the validity of national approaches to the regulation of commercial space mining in the absence of an international framework. But following the proposal, Luxembourg signed memorandum of understanding with the deep space industries, planetary resources, and iSpace for the establishment of European subsidiaries of these aspiring space mining companies. And some states received proposals to sign a memorandum of understanding to join efforts elaborating some activities or some proposals on such kind of activities of mining space resources. So certainly my next questions to Matthias Ling. So Matthias, how you could comment this invention, this novel of Luxembourg?
Yes, thank you very much. And maybe before I answer your question, I would also like to thank you very much for the invitation to this very interesting and important conference. Thank you to Roskosmos, to the Russian Academy of Science, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for inviting us. And of course, we have been looking very much forward to the discussions, and it was already very interesting to hear the different questions and answers that have been addressed. In Luxembourg, you know that we launched our initiative spaceresources.lu in the beginning of 2016, so that's already more than 4 years ago, nearly 5 years ago. And we have launched it with the vision and the aim to promote a peaceful exploration and sustainable utilization of space resources for the benefit of humankind. And at that time, we were one of the very first countries to put such a strong emphasis on space resources, because we truly believe in the opportunities that the use of space resources will bring to humanity and to more specifically exploration. Now we have, of course, also seen that it is an extremely complex subject. I think you have also just seen it in the different aspects that were just addressed. You have the legal challenges, but you have, of course, also technical challenges, huge technical challenges, financial challenges. And if you want to support the private sector here, you have also business challenges, because we are talking about markets that do not yet really exist, even if we have some nice projections that they might come alive one day. So what we did in Luxembourg with our initiative is to try and think about all the different aspects, not only the legal ones, that need to be solved here. And in the end, you very quickly see that the technical, the financial, the legal ones, all these different challenges are very much linked, and they are definitely very complex to solve. And so the only option that we think you have is to try and advance on all the different elements at the same time. And this is what we have been doing since 4 to 5 years. We have first of all put a very strong emphasis on international cooperation. I think that is the very first pillar that we have been addressing. You know that Luxembourg is a member of the European Space Agency and also a member state of the European Union. And of course, we have been active in all the different boards, relevant boards in these two organizations to bring the topic further. And I think we did that successfully. We have engaged in extremely fruitful and cooperation with the European Space Agency, for example. We have also signed, indeed, a number of bilateral agreements to try to discuss further, and we did that, for example, with many countries actually that are on the call, like the US, Japan, China, and also the UAE. We have also actually advanced the discussions with Russia, so we are very fond of this, and of course also at the same time discussed at the European level. We have also an international advisory board, which also includes people from many different regions of the world. So you see that we have put from the start a very strong emphasis on an international solution, because we truly believe that this is what is needed. And I can only agree with many things that the speakers before me have said. It is very obvious that in the medium and long term, we will need an international framework on this. Now, the second big pillar that we have addressed in our initiative is, of course, the legal and regulatory one. And again, I don't need to explain why this is complex. I think we just saw it. It's extremely complex. And again, we think this is the reason why you have to proceed step by step. Now, we have indeed enacted, as you just said, in 2017, a national law on this. The national law explains what is our view of the topic, of the space resource utilization topic, namely basically with the Article 1 saying that, in our opinion, space resources can be owned. And what our law, for the rest, what our law does is basically complying with Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, meaning showing clear conditions for us as a government to authorize corresponding missions. This is what our law does. And we are also absolutely aware that this law is not enough. And that is why we have, at the same time, during 4 years, very much engaged in international fora, both international ones and multilateral ones, both formal and informal ones. And so some of them have already been named. So if I look at the formal one, which is, of course, the most important, the Corporate Legal Subcommittee, the topic has been on its agenda now since a few years, and we have always fully supported the discussions there. And we are, of course, very much supporting the setup of a working group there. And we really hope, even though this year was a bit complicated with COVID-19, we really hope that next year we'll see the establishment of such a working group with a meaningful agenda and clear objectives, so that we will find a solution in Corpus, an international solution. In the meantime, we have to also continue the discussions. And I think, again, the conference that you organized today is a very good initiative. We need much more of this initiative. And some others have been named, like the Hague Working Group, where Luxembourg was also very much engaged. We also funded part of it. And we are very, very happy with this result. And we can only encourage also the more formal settings to take up these results, these 20 principles, and somehow bring them into a more formal setting. The Moon Village Association has been named. I think the principles that were developed there are also very valid and will certainly also help to further the discussions on a more formal level. Now, I think that's basically what I wanted to say on the legal and regulatory framework, but maybe also let me very quickly say what we do on the other parts of our initiative, because in the end, that's where you see how complex it is. And I mentioned the technical challenges. We still need to solve a lot of technical challenges, maturing the technologies that are needed to actually extract the resources. And I think Mr. Dronov mentioned it. We have not actually tested the technologies in space that are needed to extract and actually use these resources. So this needs to be done. And like a program like the Artemis program, for example, is exactly what will happen there. So that's why, in principle, we find that is a very good idea. In the end, we will only be able to derive a meaningful framework, international framework, if we really see where the different challenges are and what challenges really need to be solved. In the Hague Working Group, we talked a lot about adaptive governance, which I think is extremely important in this domain, because we don't even know what challenges we will need to solve in a few years. So we need to find a way forward that is flexible enough to react also to new challenges that we will face. So in the end, that's why I wanted to talk about this technology side as well and the research side. In the end, we will need to, in any case, find a solution, a process that can improve itself over the years. And that is why we think that the emphasis here should be on the process itself. I think we need to really stay flexible. We need to advance the discussions both in the formal international setting at the Corpus. At the same time, then we have discussions on a bilateral and multilateral basis. I think that is, I will stop here, I think, for the moment. Again, I think we are very much committed to this, and I want to thank you again very much for this discussion. And I think we have seen over the past years how quickly all this moves, so we have no time to lose to discuss further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marius. We are not losing time hearing to you because your comments are very important for us, because we would like to hear all opinions from different parts, supporters or maybe just observers of the process of creating the regulatory framework for such kind of activities. And preparing to this conference, I found a very interesting historical fact that in 2001, Gregory Nemitz claimed parking fees from NASA for the placing of its near Shoemaker research spacecraft on asteroids 433 Eros. The asteroid had been allegedly claimed as a private property by Nemitz. In an ensuing exchange of letters, the NASA categorically denied any private claim by Nemitz, stating that, I quoted, Michael, especially for you, an individual claim of appropriation of celestial body, the asteroid 433 Eros, appears to have no foundation in law. It's unlike an individual's claim for seabed minerals, which was considered and debated by the US Congress that subsequently enacted a statute, the Deep Seabed and Mineral Resources Act. So, we express different views by the fact. On practice, we have found that the main principles of space law are still working, even we have had rhetorically different opinions. So, not only United States and Luxembourg took part in this process. Our colleagues from different European countries and from the United States, from Japan, all over the world are working hardly on this issue. And we are known about the huge work done by Hague Working Group on space resources. So we carefully read the whole document, and we have some questions Overall, my question is, during declaring the adherence to the international space law, overall, the freedom of exploration that every human being could not be restricted by using outer space for research and exploration. At the same time, in this document, we could find some definition or some statements about security zones. And we found a statement that some kind of restriction could be implied temporarily. But for me, it's quite ambiguity, because how it could be freedom inside the cell, inside the restrictions. So Giuseppe Ribaldi, I address this question to you. Could you clarify these provisions, these statements of the results of your work? Micro. Sorry, there is no sound.
No sound, please.
Could you check your microphone?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, now, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So first of all, if you don't mind, I'd like to thank, like anybody has done, the organizer of this event, which I think is a very important event because it's indeed the basis for an informal discussion in order to clarify all these important issues. So thank you to Roscosmos and the Academy of Science and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, what I have to do is, being in a legal type of discussion, I have to put a disclaimer at the very beginning. The disclaimer is that, as you might know, I'm not a legal expert, okay? And in fact, so therefore, I've seen that here a lot of people are legal experts. So I will definitely not enter in any reference to any articles like many of you have done. So I apologize for that. My activity has been making sure that we deliver a good product. So we have several of the participants to the Hague Working Group, which are presently at this conference, like Mike Gold, like Matthias Link, or like Alan Shady. So these are at least three that have participated in this particular elaboration. So in terms of your specific question, which is giving a sort of time limitation, as far as I recall it, I don't know exactly which is the article you're referring to. Clearly, this was intended, if I remember correctly, my colleague can probably help me in my memory, was related to the fact that there was no intention to put any limitation and therefore any possible hint to appropriation by having basically something which is sort of permanent. I think was basically linked in the spirit. And by the way, I take the opportunity to invite all the lawyers and all the interested people to read the commentary to the Hague Working Group, which is a very large document of 160 pages, which goes in a lot of detail. So as you indicated in your question, I'm pretty sure you will find the answer, specific answer. But in a nutshell, the meaning of that kind of, let's say, implication is for the time being which is required to perform a certain activity. So there is no intention, as I said, to have it for a period of time. And this is also consistent with the principle of the basically evolving the management approach in terms of what is going to happen. We have defined in the 4 years, as you might know, from 2016 to 2019, the building blocks that you know that were presented several times, but in the final form we are presented to the corpus. I had the pleasure to present it myself at the Science and Technical Committee on the 5th of February, and the paper was distributed. So the idea of all these 20 building blocks, it is taking into account input from the multi-stakeholder approach, which is industry, as well as government representative and NGO. And so what you see over there, it is the result of a compromise between the different positions. And the aim of the building blocks and the Hague Working Group, just to be clear, It is to create an input to the relevant body, like most likely the UN Corpus, which will then be able to work on some already developed material. So there is no way that there is intention that is going to be the type of framework. It is, as is written also in the introduction, it is an input to the discussion, but we believe it's, we hope, is as I've heard comment from other people, is a good, let's say, input because it has been discussed with many stakeholders. So, and we had the opportunity to have also Roscosmos as an observer for most of the time. So, therefore, I think I can only invite you, if you have a very specific question, and today I didn't thought it was the time to go in much detail. As I said, there is a very large and detailed document, which most likely will address and reply to your question. I was mainly related and important to explain, because you mentioned in your introduction about the goal of this workshop, the public and the public opinion. And I think being myself in the function of Executive Secretary of the Hague Working Group and on the other organization, to me the public is very important. And so I think we have to get the public also involved. And so therefore, what is important to clarify is that we are in an urgent need to have a multilateral understanding of all the different rules and basically principle to exploit and to use the space resources. And my main concern, since we created the Moon Village Association, is to focus on the moon, because the moon is the first clear utilization location. So that is the reason why we feel, and we have done also a bit of that in the Hague Working Group, we focus in general, but I think the moon is the first application. And as some of previous speakers has indicated, the way I personally see the situation, the building blocks are going to be hopefully taken into account in whatever corpus deliberation will take place, because basically those are an input, and we have kept informed all the corpus members all the way along. So that's an element of importance. However, I just want to mention that everybody knows that corpus has a certain length of time to process all the different viewpoints and get a consensus. So I think this is an absolutely must and is a clear way forward. On the other hand, and that's my last comment, there is a number of increasing missions going to the moon, and our Chinese colleague has reminded us, and we have also the Indian with Chandrayaan-3 and United States, as hopefully Russia. There is a number of missions going to the moon, and those missions going to the moon, apart from the major treaty, do not have any common level playing field defined. So that is the reason we feel that there is an urgency, an operational urgency, to try to get an understanding how the different missions going to the moon will be carried out, not only in terms of space resources, but also in terms of debris generation, as well as coordination of landing spots, especially when now a number of missions are going to the moon in the same area. So we feel strong need in order to reduce the risk on a global level because of the international political climate, that there is a sort of understanding with or outside the corpus in order to really have an operational, let's say, way of moving forward with a number of increasing missions to the moon in order to avoid possible risk. Thank you.
Yes, and Giuseppe Ribaldi clarified the next approach following, I suppose, the intention of Luxembourg. This working group propose a huge recommendation in these building blocks overall in amendments on clarification to this document. But it raises another questions. As I understood, you propose these building blocks were taken as a basis for future discussion at COPUS as a primary document. We could put some amendments or maybe some corrections or something like that. And another questions, no, just my comments. Certainly, Roscosmos and our Ministry of Foreign Affairs were invited as observers to the work of a higher working group, but due to the rules established by, or procedures established by the higher working group, observers was unable even make comments, not to contribute to this document. So, in our point of view, this document contains not the whole visions, not the whole views from different parts, and contains a lot of ambiguities and contradictions. So, in this statement, I would like to say that it's my point of view, my personal point of view, how we could take as a basis for discussion a document that was created not taking into account all opinions, that reflects not all views, not from all countries, not from all experts. Yes, Alexei, please.
Thank you, Vasily. First of all, Giuseppe, thank you so much for your short presentation. I also would like to thank Matthias for very interesting remarks. And colleagues, there are some thoughts I would like to speak aloud in this studio in order to put us on the same line, so to say. First of all, Giuseppe, my understanding of the situation is that there was a community of experts representing different parts of the world in different sectors, trying to at least to organize something like a brainstorming on the issue. My understanding is that we as an international community, we really need to have this brainstorming for a quite simple reason, and it was touched upon by Mike as well, that we need to basically to have an agenda. My understanding as expert is that for the time being, we're just trying to accommodate all the issues and to classify, to form an agenda for further global discussion. And this is a very serious challenge by itself. And big issues, what we really need to discuss in the corpus as well, is how to do it in a way that would accommodate, first of all, different views, and in order to organize this in a way which would, I would like to say, because my understanding is that not lawyers should start this discussion, frankly speaking. I'm quite frank with you, because there are so many matters where first of all, we need scientific investigation. We need scientific knowledge as a basis. First of all, to think about how we should treat this problem as such. Yes, for example, because I will give you only a small example, the issues about the water and the moon. As for now, it is not quite clear where, to what extent, how much water are and where. And this is, by the way, one of the big issues where we need additional scientific investigation. So, just to comment a little bit on this issue, probably it would be, it was quite suitable that you made your presentation before the scientific and technical subcommittee, because my feeling is that we need to use the mandate of the scientific technical subcommittee to elaborate, to have this list of issues where we need to study, first of all, and nothing at this time, nothing in the treaty impedes us to organize a big international project towards scientific investigation. So far I understand there are basically two blocks where we need to have this investigation. First of all, asteroids, and second, the moon. First the moon, second the asteroids. The moon as a stage for the future investigations, for planning further operations by global community in the space. This is a big common project of mankind, and we need to do this together. There are many, as Matthias said, and I would like to stress this, many, and the colleagues from China as well, they also expressed this word, challenges. indeed there are a lot of challenges. And for example, one of just fragment of this big picture is the issue, for example, about elaborating on environmental assessment of activities of on planets, on celestial bodies. Because we have here, by the way, we are confronting basically with a very serious problem of establishing a quite new area of legal ruling and policies, namely environment, but not only in the sense of Earth realities, but as well in the sense of space realities. One risk is to bring to the Earth something which we don't like and don't need to have here. Another thing is not to disturb the environment of planets, asteroids, and so on and so forth. So it's quite a big challenge. Another point in legally speaking, is also to take into consideration. We are talking basically about the realities of public law. But public law, as Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong, but public law is not the whole thing. Because we're also talking about private partnerships in this regard, and very difficult interrelations between the public rules and something we are going to do with the inclusion of private sector. So we would need to have a quite clear understanding of, also from the perspective of private international law. And for example, I do not have any just recollection about a seminar or a conference where people started, for example, even to think about this. Just taking, for example, the example of Antarctica, we had very interesting problems here derived from the sphere of private international law. How to apply these rules, especially taking into consideration the very difficult constructions of these contracts and so on and so forth. We might foresee in this regard. So that's why we need to use our understanding of the situation. We need to use the mandates we have already within the United Nations organization to have this discussion in order to, first of all, to build upon a clear agenda. And this might be one of the most important tasks of the working group we are going to establish within the framework of the legal subcommittee. And to think about how we could use some backgrounds we have already. And thanks, Giuseppe, made a very excellent job, frankly speaking, because we have prepared something which may be used as a base. I would say that, probably just following what Vasily said, I would say that yes, we had on a state level, we had some questions as regards, so to say, the procedure being used. But what is extremely important, to look into the substance of the matter. So you try to somehow to study this at least in depth, yes. And there are many issues. My question to you personally would be, as for now, we have something which is not being brought officially to the copy's attention. And this is a body with a specific procedures. So there should be a country or somebody who is to bring this to officially to the, not only in form of presentation, but officially as a paper, so to say, for discussion. Because before starting discussions on an interstate level using this substance, using this material, we need to be brought it officially to the copies. My question is, are there any plans to do this, first of all? Second issue, probably, Mike, this question goes to you. Because this is, we have in the 1967 treaty a list of provisions dealing with exchanging information. Now, my understanding is that you as a national capacity, you're sharing some information, you're holding some bilateral consultations, so on and so forth. But in our view, there is a quite clear need to start exchanging those views in more, so to say, broader context, in order to share this information about, for example, Artemis project with other member states members and member state of the United Nations, in order to just look at it in more careful and think about how we could, using this framework, to move forward. And this is also very important from strategic point of view, because among us there are several nations with also having some national, so far I understand, national programs and plans as regard to this. And this is very important because we would need to have this coordination. And the matter of coordination and exchanging information is one of the most important pillar of the 1967, which we should use. Just to resume my statement, once again, colleagues, what we need to think about is where we really need to modify and what we need to modify. Because as for now, we have quite equal
quite adequate legal ground, at least for starting big international project towards collecting information about what we are naming space resources. And our idea, we already touched upon this matter very shortly during the legal subcommittees, to think even about the possibility to establish something like an international, I would say, list, so to say, or something.
Some questions should be answered.
Something which would accommodate our knowledge about where we have what are kind of resources we might have, because it might be not only mineral resources, there might be also some other type of resources. Whether or not those resources may be used, for what reasons they may be used, are there any economic, objective economic and financial grounds for doing this? And another very important question is whether or not those resources also involve the objects of anthropogenic origin. For example, we are talking about space debris only in negative sense. But there might be some interesting questions as regard to using the space debris also as space resources. And this is not so very easy question, because we have here a problem of the national jurisdiction about what kind of object may be considered as acting, so to say, space object and not acting. So many interesting questions, but we need to find a place where we should discuss it and to enumerate, to have this on the list, so to say. Yes, our proposal is to move to swift to this discussion in the corpus, to use as effective as we can the mandates within the corpus and of the corpus. We also very much welcome, so to say, your reactions on these. And it should be quite clear that those dialogue may be also maintained by some bilateral contacts and some multilateral, without prejudice to this dialogue. Yes, but we need to have something on global level as well. So, really sorry for being so long.
Following to Alexei concerns and questions put on the table, I would like to add that many times we asked our colleagues, our distinguished colleagues at Corpus, maybe refrain from official reports on national achievements or something like that, because due to existing technical possibilities like internet, and they could be published on official sites of space agencies or ministries of foreign affairs, and every person who is interested in such information could reach that. But they really need an exchange of views, exchange of opinions overall in Corpus, in truly international platform for elaborating legal framework and discuss it as well technical and scientific issues among nations. So in this case, I kindly ask you to pay attention to this concern expressed by Alexei and by myself as well, and by the Russian Federation officially during the last 10 session, at least, of Corpus and its subsidiaries. So we have a lot of questions received from our students, from the participants who are following us through the internet, but we would like other speakers to express their views. And the next speaker in our list is Mr. Helmani Mudau, the Chief Director for Space Science and Technology of the Department of Science and Innovations of the Republic of South Africa. Please, sir, has the floor. Unfortunately, we lost the connection, no? I could not see the connection. So we lost the connection with to our friends, and while we are waiting them to reconnect, I would like to Mr. Keiji Kitamura, the director of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in Moscow office, to say something or maybe to comment something. Mr. Kitamura.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for coordinating this type of conference. I appreciate the Russian efforts very much. And for the JAXA's activity in the field of space exploration, JAXA is currently conducting the asteroid probe Hayabusa series, which aims to perform sample return from asteroids. After overcoming many difficulties, the first generation Hayabusa successfully accomplished the sample return mission from the asteroid Itokawa in 2010. Building on the experience gained from the first Hayabusa mission, the space probe Hayabusa 2 was designed as a successor to the first generation Hayabusa. Hayabusa 2 will bring back samples from the asteroid Ryugu to learn more about the origin and the evolution of the solar system and the origin of the life. Hayabusa 2 launched in 2014, touched down on Ryugu last year to collect the samples. The capsule containing the sample is scheduled to return to Earth on December 6 this year. Hayabusa 2 is an international mission involving NASA, which operates the Odysseus-Rex mission, and the DLR and CNES in Europe, as well as the government of Australia, where the capsule recovery is planned. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce JAXA's overall scenario for the international space exploration. JAXA is working to participate in the U.S. proposed Artemis program and the sustainable human lunar surface exploration by contributing our knowledge and technology gained through the ISS program and the space science missions. For the Gateway, JAXA is engaging in detailed technical deliberations to contribute to the technical excellence we have, including human space habitation technologies and disruptor missions. For activities on the lunar surface, we are developing the Smart Lander for Investment mission, so-called SLEEP mission, which will utilize the data acquired from JAXA Lunar Orbit Selene to demonstrate the precision landing technology essential for future lunar and planetary exploration. We are also planning the lunar polar exploration mission targeting 2023 or 2024 launch. This mission will investigate the quantity of the water and the possibility of the resource utilization in the lunar polar region. Additionally, JAXA is studying the pressurized crew rover with a Japanese manufacturer, aiming to enable long-range crew exploration on the lunar surface. Regarding Mars, JAXA is leading the Martian Moon Exploration (MMX) called MXS mission to return samples from Phobos. The mission utilizes the lunar exploration techniques and discoveries and is planned to launch in 2024. JAXA identifies these missions as the means of gaining scientific knowledge and expanding activities, and will continue to strive forward those goals in collaboration with the international and industrial partners. And for the JAXA considers the exploration of space resources will play a crucial role in future sustainable space exploration. Ensuring resource utilization will indeed reduce the amount of resource needed to be transported from Earth, thus cutting down overall costs and promoting a more sustainable approach to space activity. Lunar water ice or hydrogen is thought to be trapped in the polar region, converted into liquid hydrogen and oxygen by electrolysis. This water could be used as fuel for landers, hence enabling such much more efficient exploration. In addition, foreign nations and industries are making plans to explore space resources. The establishment of international rules and framework is being discussed with this purpose of preventing conflicts and disputes among governments and or private sectors. Japanese government also studying the development of a system that takes into account the status of the private sectors regarding space resource exploration including the water surface, or including the lunar surface. It is our belief that such development will encourage projects in this private sector and contribute to the exploration of Japan's space activities. JAXA is committed to providing continuous support to the Japanese government's efforts in this matter through our technical expertise. Thank you very much for your attention.
Tamura. So I would like to ask you my personal question. What do you think will be the most valuable resource on the moon?
As I said, that for my personal opinion, it's ice or water.
Opinion.
What is the most?
Okay, what is your in your personal opinion is the most interesting resource on the moon?
Oh, yeah, it's water.
Water. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, so we have established the connection with Mr. Mudao. So, Mr. Mudao, I would like you to take the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the Russian Federation and Roskosmos for organizing this conference. The South African delegation really are very grateful to the Russian Federation for this first session where we have to engage in this very critical topic. We just want to emphasize that as South Africa, we do place greater importance on the development of space technology, as well as the scientific research that underpins them. I would like to bring to your attention that as South Africa, we are in the process of finalizing the review of the existing Space Affairs Act in order to include new and topical provisions, including taking into cognizance the latest developments with respect to the outer space. And this also obviously touches on this topic that we're discussing today. But this updated legislation also expressly incorporates space treaties and conventions that South Africa is party to, including the Outer Space Treaty, the Rescue Agreement, the Liability Convention, and the Registration Convention. We would like to just stress the importance of international cooperation in this regard, that for all these and for the South African space program as well, that international cooperation is the cornerstone. The unprecedented global cooperation of experts helps identify gaps and reduce duplication in the areas of sustainable development and sound environmental management. Chair and moderators, just before we get to this topic today, which obviously touches on the legal aspects of exploration, extraction, and utilization of space resources, I think it's critical for us as South Africa to highlight the agreement governing the activities of states on the moon and other celestial bodies, the Moon Treaty. For South Africa, we would like to highlight that the most controversial section of the Moon Treaty deals with the natural resources on the moon. The Moon Treaty provides that the moon and its natural resources are the common heritage of mankind, and the harvesting of those resources is forbidden except through an international regime established to govern the exploitation of such resources when it becomes feasible to do so. I think this is very important for us to underline that. The moon shall be used by all states parties exclusively for peaceful purposes. In exploring and using the moon, states shall take measures to prevent the disruption of the existing balance of its environment. We are of the view that the prevention of the disruption of the existing environmental balance in outer space is extremely important in the utilization of space resources going forward. The exact nature of this regime is not detailed, nor is the term resources clearly defined. Until the United Nations Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space, COPUOS, reviews and updates the Moon Treaty, the COPUOS member states cannot unilaterally extract resources from celestial bodies for personal gain, as this will be in contravention of the universally accepted principle that outer space is the domain of all humankind. That has been accepted by all COPUOS member states. I would like to also highlight that South Africa is also monitoring the developments that are happening within the Hague Convention, and therefore we would like to also just highlight that we will continue to participate in COPUOS legal subcommittee committees on potential legal models for activities in exploration, exploitation, and utilization of space resources prior to developing our own national position and legal regulatory framework on the utilization of the space resources. We would also like to just point out that on the very famous 62nd session, that the Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space adopted preamble and the 21 guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space. And these provide guidance on policy and regulatory framework for space activities, including safety of space operation, international cooperation, and mostly for the importantly for the developing countries, the capacity building and the scientific and technical research development. I would like to thank the Russian Federation again and just re-emphasize the point that South Africa also firmly believes that the multilateral approach within the United Nations system it's quite critical in this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Badao. And I would like to welcome my special guest, my personal friend. NASA space policy. I spent a lot of time during committees, and you involved in the whole agenda of those entities at the UN platform discussing legal aspects of space activities or different branches of space activities. So my question is how does the UIA view the activities of space resources utilization? What are international efforts you could evaluate as a perspective? How do you think, and we have the similar question made on web platform, is COPUOS is able to produce something useful that could be taken as a basis, a legal basis for future space activities on exploration, extraction, and utilization of space resources? Nasser, you have the floor.
So much. So it seems to be your microphone is not correctly for now. Can you check the sound to maybe use handset? Can we try now? Can you hear me? That's it. Is it clear? Yes. Yeah, can you hear me? 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 Yeah, can you hear me?
The earphones or speakers.
Is it better now?
Yes. Okay.
О, у Рибальди висит рука.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to thank the Russian.
Okay.
This very important event, and this is actually the second time where we participate in such an engaging and important discussions in relation to emerging space legislation issues and international law issues. I remember a couple of years back, we had the first United Nations International Conference on Space Law, also hosted by the Roskosmos and the Russian administration, and we attended that. And I think space resources was also one of the agenda. Now, what I wanted to also highlight about your first question, that is, how are we viewing this in the UAE? Well, let me start by saying the space agency, the UAE space agency. When we develop the UAE space agency and we are setting the regulatory and policy framework, we come up with two key principles that we would like to achieve in the end of the day. One is maximizing the benefit of space, and second is to sustain the development and the growth of the space sector. In our view, and based on some analysis, that the extraction of space resources and utilization of space resources is a way towards achieving those two principles. I believe that we come into the next era of space exploration. In my humble view, the first era of space exploration was more about discovery, going there, trying to understand what is happening. But we're moving today from discovery to utilization, extraction and utilization. And I think the next phase, as we all aim, is to live in space and settle in space. This is the aim that everybody's talking. Number are talking about in space exploration is that we would like to have human life in outer space. The bridge is to utilize the space resources and potentially be able to have a living in space. So we're moving from discovery to utilization and potentially settlement. We believe, back to the two principles that we're talking about, that this has really excited the sector. We've heard earlier that we're moving from government sole missions to privatization and commercialization, because this is really the sustainability of the space sector. This is really what's going to bring innovation of the space sector, and it's going to sustain its activity when it comes also from economic perspective. Now, if we continue to live with discovery, I think that is not much highly attractive to the, I would say, the private sector. But moving towards the word utilization and living in space, that for me is easy to sell when I'm talking to government, from government to private sector. That there is something that can be utilized. We can move from just watching what is there to actually utilize something, regardless how long that vision is. But that's a very important driver for privatization. And I think it's also this is a very good example of that. It really also excites partnership. And that is actually three levels. It excites partnership at intra-sector level, which means within the space sector. Then you have, you have the exploration people, the telecommunication, the satellite telecommunications, the Earth observation, and so on. They're talking to each other to reach that challenging and exciting role, which is extracting or utilization of space resources. But then you also have the intersector, as we did here in the UAE. When we talked about that, we actually found ourselves talking to people in the mining or the energy industry. And that is really important as we are engaging other sectors in our space exploration missions. And frankly speaking, when we were in the discovery level, it wasn't as much exciting as when we're talking about utilization and settlement, to excite other sectors to be part of our exploration settings. And last but not least is the international partnership. And this meeting is another good example of that. And Hague is another good example of that, and Kupus is another good example of that, and the ISEF2 that we had in Tokyo is another good example of how moving towards space utilization and space resources is exciting that partnership at the various levels. I think last to your second question, I think there's, as mentioned earlier, there is more discussions at a multilateral and international, and actually the word global will be better, because today, when I'm looking at the list of the distinguished speakers, they're phenomenal, but they all come from the same background, which is government. I'm not sure if there is industry among us here. There's a very important role to play in this if we're talking about sustaining such a long-term vision towards exploration 2.0. I think there is more discussions to engage other sectors. We're talking about space resources and living in space. It's no more space agency. We need to start talking to other sectors who have experience on living here on Earth and transfer that as a spin-in to space and potentially spin-off to them from there. So these are all opportunities. I think there has been some misinterpretation of the first move that happens toward that, in my humble opinion, is there was definitely, and I was one of the people that, when I first heard about the 2015 Act by US about utilization of space resources, I was, yes, it took me some time. I was like, what? I mean, is that in line with the Outer Space Treaty? Are we doing something abnormal here? Is this the right approach? The same questions that were asked by the distinguished speaker from Russia. And it was also asked by myself. I mean, how is that? And I immediately, at that time, talked to a couple of people in the US, Ken Hodgkin and another person called Peter Marquez. And I was, it can't be how you're doing this. But I have to hear more to understand. And I was listening and listening. And frankly speaking, someone has to start. We have to start from somewhere. And without that act, we wouldn't reach that discussion today, honestly. And when we think about it more, at least there is a transparency about it. At least there is some sort of regulation and some sort of governance to that activities. We've heard earlier that there has been already some missions that actually try to extract some few things and try to test some few things in space. But there was no governance about that. It's just under a big umbrella called space exploration. But today, if we're moving commercial sector towards space exploration, we have to govern their utilization of these resources. So it's important to have a regime. Now we come to the last point, which is which approach is better? Should we move as a bottom-up or should we go as a top-down? Should we come from a UN purpose, and that's your last question? Should we come from UN/Scopus, or should we start from a national perspective? And honestly speaking, it's a combination. You need the pressure from the bottom to give a real need that we need to move fast, and give you real requirements from the business that shows you that this is something we'd like to do, and therefore we need to move fast. But at the same time, also we have to admit, can Kupus come up with something useful? Yes, it can. But the question that is more important, how long it will take to come up with that answer. And we have to admit, we didn't yet define the definition of delimitation of space. And it will take some time, probably, to define space resources. So we need to act differently in Kupus and try to augment it, as you mentioned earlier, I think the Russian colleague, we need to augment it with these outside activities of Kupus to minimize and try to help Kupus to come up with the real objectives. Hague was a good example, but it's not the end. Hague was a start. I mean, the International Block for Space Resources, we participated in that, and we know that that was a start. And we're going to take that to Kupus. But we're trying to help some, to start, for Kupus to start from somewhere and hopefully bring it to an alignment. I think what's last but not least is that it is necessary that we talk more at the various levels, from technical, from political, from space agency, from MOFA side, and with industry as well as with the government. This is the only way we'd be able to come up with the actual needs, the actual challenges towards that, but we should not block innovation. I think the main role by governments today is to enable, through its governance, innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasser. As usual, you are very pragmatic and very rational. And we appreciate you are sharing our vision of the future role and current role of the COPUS and its subcommittees. So, colleagues, we would like to make a short coffee break for 10 minutes. And during this time, we will show you some videos and on our future conferences we would like to hold this year. And after that, we will continue with question and answers. And overall, I would like our speakers, you have the possibility to ask each other if you have some comments, if you would like some kind of clarification, you could ask not only the studio, but another person connected to this conference. And after that, we have to give the floor to our colleagues who put questions on web platform, and we have some colleagues in studio as well. And we are waiting you in 10 minutes. And please do not disconnect. We have a special promotion video on our future events. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have announced a 10 minutes break in our session. Ladies and gentlemen, in less than 5 minutes, we will continue.
Dear colleagues, we will continue our discussion, and we start the section of question and answers. And first of all, I would like to ask our speakers, if you have any questions to each other, please just press your microphone and address your comment or your question to your colleague.
Can I have comments, please?
Yes, Mr. Ribaldi, we hear you.
Okay, so because I was asked a certain number of questions, so I may take the opportunity to give two answers and then a comment. So the first question were about the procedure of the Hague Working Group. Since I'm the executive secretary, I know exactly how this has been made. And just for the record, all the partners have been invited to become members, including Roscosmos and United States, State Department, and many of the stakeholders decided to be observers, which obviously is quite appreciated. So just to say that we have invited as many stakeholders as possible, and then some countries have decided to be observer. We have United States, which has been observer, with Roscosmos, and so forth. So I just want to, for the record. And the last point is that observer, of course, have provided comments, and the Hague Working Group has been open for consultation for about 6 months, also on the website. So there has been plenty of a possibility to give comments, just for the record. But again, as we said before, that is not anything cast in concrete. It's just a starting point, which of course can be improved and will be improved. So that was my first point. The second point, there was a question, I think, from basically Alexei, about how proceed in the frame of the Corpus. Well, the reason is I'm wearing here two hats, if I may say. With my hat of the Hague Working Group, the only reason why I've attended Corpus is because I've been part of the Dutch delegations. So I have made my presentation under the introduction and under the heading of the Dutch delegation. As you might know, the Dutch government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has been the first sponsor, if I may say, of this activity, followed in the second phase by the Luxembourg government. So all presentation, and I've made personally 3 presentations to Corpus, have been made with the introduction of the Dutch delegation. And I will expect, as far as I knew, since a few months ago, before the Corpus problem started, that the Dutch delegation, with potentially also with the Luxembourg states, they might propose indeed officially to take these building blocks as a possible, let's say, input for the to be constituted working group. So that hopefully should answer also Alexei. And then my final, this is a proposal. I have heard a number of people which have realized that, of course, Corpus is the official location to take place this discussion, and nobody has disputed, nobody has put it in question. What I have heard, that of course people realize that the time that you can spend in Corpus in order to discuss extensively is not enough. And so probably there is a need, and many people have made reference to unofficial discussion, in official form. So the question is, which one could be something to prepare for the Corpus, so that when the Corpus meeting are more effective, because, as I said, you need discussion. And so you can either have countries doing as you did today, which is, of course, very important to do that, and therefore generate multilateral discussion, or you can have, let's say, an institutional organization which can host as a neutral organization. And now taking, and I stop there, my other hat as Moon Village Association, being an NGO, obviously we will be pleased, being a neutral organization with 46 countries at the moment, to indeed try to help if this is considered useful for having this uninformal discussion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ribaldi, and I have some comments from Michael Newman, maybe worrying that we could forget about the Copious website because of not having the opportunity to taste the Wiener melange due to the pandemic situation. But Michael, don't worry. We are usually in touch with not only with website of Copious, and we are familiar with the information that building blocks were submitted by Netherlands officially and translated in all official languages. And certainly we're pleased that we will have a good material for discussion as a basis for our future work in a working group that I expect could be established not only in legal subcommittee, but as well in the scientific and technical subcommittee of Copious. So, Michael, don't worry. And I return to our speakers. Have anybody questions to other colleagues? Please, do not hesitate. I see Maria Slim.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to react a bit on what Giuseppe Raibaldi just said, also in response to what was said by Mr. Dronov before regarding the Hague Working Group. I participated personally during 4 years in this group, and I must say my observation is it was very open. The discussions also from observers was really much encouraged, and of course even if the members had a bit more formal role, all comments basically were taken into account and were answered. And you know, when you participate during 4 years in all these meetings and discussions, sometimes it was actually a bit frustrating because many issues were debated several times, and of course at a certain stage you cannot really hear them anymore. But that means also that they were actually taken very seriously, and of course it makes them even stronger and even better thought through. And this is why also the Luxembourg, me personally, but also the Luxembourg government was able to support these building blocks also in the further process. And I also want to react to what was said. It is absolutely clear that for us, this is not a basis that needs to be now taken up by the Corpus. It is one of the inputs that can be taken by the working group at Corpus. And of course, if this working group decides based on some of the discussion on that work as well, we can only very strongly support this because they have been discussed at length, and not only by governments and by agencies, but also by academia and industry. And that is why we really truly believe that this is a good basis that is also very inclusive. And as Nasser said, I think on the importance to include not only agencies and governments in these talks, but also industry and academia. I think the Hague Working Group really provided a very good example on how you can do this. So that's what I wanted to say, just in reaction to what Giuseppe and Nasser and others said, and also supporting these. Thank you.
Mike Watcher displayed.
I see Mike. Question? No.
Just a comment. Again, we're moving into this exciting new era of commercial space, private sector companies becoming more significant players. And I just wanted to reemphasize that's why the exercise of The Hague was so important, so helpful, that we were able to bring together the private sector companies. I participated in The Hague at the time I was in the private sector, as well as academics and experts. So we're going to need more of that. And just looking at our own domestic processes in the US, that's been a challenge, that so many of our laws and structures are set up to accommodate only government activities. So I call it a challenge, let's call it an opportunity that we're all going to have. And as Nasser mentioned, we need to leverage these processes and our rules and laws to enable innovation and allow us to go further to discover new science and improve life here on Earth. And in the end, what I'm so happy about from this entire conversation is I think we're all in many ways saying the exact same thing. I think there's agreement that we've got an important foundation with the Outer Space Treaty, that we all need to reaffirm and implement our obligations under the existing Outer Space Treaty principles and goals, and that we need to go forward at the COPUOS, at groups like The Hague, the Moon Village Association, bilateral discussions, other multilateral forums to talk about the future. I think it's very unfortunate that due to COVID, we couldn't have the discussion at COPUOS this year, but I'm very much looking forward to it next year. So in the end, we're all saying the same thing.
Thank you, Mike. And if you have a question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you so much. I really enjoy the atmosphere of our today's deliberations. What I would like to stress and what I would like to pay attention to is what was said by Nasser. It was also very important. I mean, this issue about interconnection between the international law and national legislation in terms of space resources is one of issues where we need to come together to discuss it. You see, because he's completely right saying that at the beginning there might be several misunderstandings of the real intentions of countries who elaborated on the national law to some extent. Yes, because as you read just the title of the US law, you see in space resources, the first impression is that they're breaching the Article 2 of 1967 treaty. But this is, in my personal view, it is a very mistaken opinion. The role of national legislation indeed might be very effective indeed. And this role might be, first of all, to inspire our societies to think about the future and to try to think about future profile of world economy, which would be not only on Earth, as it was rightly pointed out, but as well in the space. Moreover, I have the feeling, also I'm not an economist, that the most part of the future infrastructure would be in the space rather than on the Earth. So that's why we should really think strategically about the future, using national legislation as an instrument to build up our national potentials and to prepare ourselves for very broad and extensive international cooperation. But what is extremely critical in this discussion, dear colleagues, in our opinion, is not to overcome the red lines we have now in international law. And first of all, in 1967 treaties as regards the basic principles, for quite simple reason. We should avoid any situation of global conflict in space and conflict which would have projections on Earth. So that's why it is extremely important to stick to those principles and, basing on those principles, to elaborate further on what we could do. Another point about the timing, a very important issue, and I've heard many issues as regards this point, especially from private sector. Let us be frank. It is also something like a psychological instrument to inspire our colleagues from private sector to move forward in this regard, you see. But frankly speaking, for the time being, we don't have even technologies and infrastructure for activities like this. I mean, for example, extracting mineral resources, yes? At the same time, we should not forget about the stories of other branches of international law, for example, international maritime law, where we had basically a very similar situation, where we had some basic conventions, we have a very broad established practice of states, and where we undertook a very serious measures and complex measures towards establishing a universal legal framework, which now is an, so to say, a big book of law, and it is very much respected, and indeed it creates a very serious basis for our national activities as well. I know that for some of us, the issue about hard law and soft law is quite sensitive one, but it also needs to be discussed very objectively and very professionally. Because here we have a sphere where there might be an interaction between, let's say, some more general rules, framework rules, and quite specific technical standards, which sometimes needs to be universal, unified. In this regard, we also I would like to draw your attention to some very interesting statements made, for example, by Mr. Brandenstein in the beginning of July, while participating in a press conference. I suppose it was video conference with the participation of some academic institutions, where he, by the way, referred to the practice of International Convention on Maritime Collisions. I mean, this convention where we have a quite exhaustive list of rules, but Mike, those rules are obligatory rules, and this is a very well-established logic behind these, because would you have just recommendations for this, you would not avoid the collisions. So you have to clearly understand what the captain of the ship should do if another ship is coming to him, towards him. A very similar situation you might have in the space, especially taking into account this traffic issue, space traffic issue, which is a new challenge indeed. And this is also part of the context. So that's why, colleagues, please, let us think about this very responsibly, about how we should discuss the matter about timing. You see, because timing issue should not be a prejudice to our discussion about the, about the substance of the thing. We should not say we do not have time, we have to start extracting mineral resources just now, and that's why we are not going within the United Nations. What we could accept is to think altogether about modalities of our discussion. You are completely right saying, Giuseppe, that sometimes we do not need time enough within the copies to discuss some matters. Yeah, we need probably more time. But it's up to us to decide as states parties how to better organize this work in order to make this more sustainable, yes, more comprehensive. It's up to us. We are masters of the game here. So let's bring all those issues to the copies and discuss it and decide upon it. Yes. We should have time. Yes. I'm terribly sorry, colleagues, but just to react very shortly, but it's.
I fully agree with you. We are master of times, but we are short of times now. And the only things I could add to this speech, that certainly it depends on us how we could organize the work of copiers, how productive we could be. So I see Nasser would like to say something. Nasser, please be very short, because we have 4 universities connected to our conference. So I would like to give them floor, maybe to express or maybe to ask us, because we are trying to preserve the space for peaceful uses, not only for present, but you remember, for future generations. So we would like our universities as well taking part in our discussion. Nasser, please, you have the floor.
Okay, so may I suggest that we change the name from Russian Outer Space Talks to Future Generation Outer Space Talks? Okay, so thank you so much. This is a really amazing intellectual discussion, and I really cannot echo. And I think someone said it seems that everybody is saying the same thing, but coming from a different start in that cycle. And a matter of fact, what we learn eventually doesn't matter where you start from, but it's important that we start somewhere. Without some movement from someone, we wouldn't have been in that discussion here. And we need to, respond, not react to whatever actions that has been taken, to make sure that we get the best out of whatever movement that's been done. I have to echo what mentioned by Donny about, principle for us in the UAE from the we're talking to the international stakeholders that there is no way we'll move forward in any discussions, whether it's the LTS, whether it's the Hague group discussions, whether it's any discussions that takes place in here, unless we emphasize no break of the principles that well stated in the outer space treaties. And that's what we see over and over, and you see it almost in the preamble of everything. You see it in the preamble of Hague. You see it in the preamble of the ISEF2 that was held in Tokyo a couple of years back. And I assure you, when we look at the draft of Artemis, it also mentions that on the preamble there. So that's a good thing now about the principles. I think what is missing today is augmenting these treaties. There are details. These treaties are back 50 years, and they have served us, and they will continue to serve us. But they never block us from coming with the next level. Whether it's, as you mentioned wisely, soft law. I think we've seen the experience that we have try to move with hard law in different aspects, but eventually soft law like LTS proved itself and opened the door, and it will continue in my humble view. I think there is another point that you mentioned is very clearly. Purpose is us. It's my friends from Roscosmos who are here with us. It's my friends from Chinese administration. It's Matthias. It's Nas. It is us. So it is really these platforms that we're doing here in the side of Purpose is the way to help Purpose, because if Purpose in the end is a table where we sit and we discuss. So I think if we're able to take the advantage of such webinars and such forums that you have, for example, organized and others can, that will help us to come to Purpose and make the best out of the time. One last point that was mentioned earlier. Now, according to the procedure of Purpose, unfortunately, private sector doesn't have much time and involvement into that. So we need to, of course, continue to have forums outside Purpose to make sure that they are engaged and their views are also reflected in the outcomes, because we are here eventually to serve that sector and that industry, who is the sustainable engine for the space exploration 2.0 and next step.
And we have 4 universities, and I would like to give the floor first to Sur and next Reshetnov University. Because of the different time zones, they maybe become asleep a little bit. So, to Sur, if you have any question or comments, please, we are waiting for. We have approximately 2 minutes. Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Yes, we are listening to
you. Yes. Good day. Thank you for possibility to ask the questions about for all participants of this conference. We are from university, and for us interesting the role of our university and another universities of Russia and all world in decision of the task for finding resources and law for convenient law for these goals. Thank you.
Certainly, let me answer your question. At least 3 more Russian universities follows us, and abroad there are a lot of scientific and research organizations, and Matthias and our colleagues from Netherlands could answer better, because I could remember at least 10 universities involved in the discussion of this matter, of this issue, and working not only on legal aspects of this activity, but as well on scientific and technical possible solutions for such kind of activities. And I would like that our universities
okay,
would be involved as well.
Okay. would like just to add that actually what is unfortunate for this topic of space researches, and what is fortunate for universities, that we do not know what we want in space. We do not know what is useful in space that we can use. So the primary role of universities on this stage is definitely engaging this research to find something really useful and practical in space. And it could be a very surprising answer. Maybe it is water on the moon, maybe it is some foreign ship coming in, foreign asteroid coming from interstellar space with some signatures from foreign civilization, and which we need to reach and to find something, some garbage from the extragalactic civilization that could be useful on our ingenious territory, nobody knows. So welcome to this bright field of space exploration.
And next, Reshetnev University, please. Do you have any question?
Самара был вопрос.
I see Samara University have one. Please. Faculty of Law, Samara University. We could not hear you. Do you have a question? You put it written down. I'll try to. I could not see. Самара? Не видно вопрос.
Не видно вопрос.
Faculty of Law, Samara.
I think they have also
Question
So you have some connection.
Make national space legislation fit international space law. Talking about commercial usage of space, what's about questions of ownership and how can it suit the Moon Treaty? Yes, the same questions we have put on the table, especially to Mike Gold, and we have heard some answers, not satisfactory, Michael, but we expect to continue our discussion during the official meetings in Copius. And there is a very, very long questions. Unfortunately, I could not see it on my computer, only on white screen, but it's with small letters. What's of high importance, especially when we are talking about peaceful usage of space? These questions, I suppose, should be addressed to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Alexei, would you like to answer what is more important than we are talking about the peaceful usage of outer space?
What is important?
What is more important?
What's more important? I would say that the more important is, first of all, to avoid any, let's say, actions and activities which would lead to, I would say, weaponization of mentality of states, first of all, and private persons and citizens as well. Because you see, we know quite well what might it mean. We have a very sensitive environment of space. Likewise, we have a very sensitive environment of other common spaces. For example, in Antarctica, you know, we have some, not only space is common space, and we need to be very we need to elaborate on policies which would very much respect the specific status of these and all the basic principles we're discussing now. And I'm very happy to state that we are really on the same ground, irrespectively of what countries or what schools of thinking we're representing. This is absolutely important ground for further discussions. As our distinguished colleague from South Africa said as well, I would like to stress that we have here common ground, and this common ground includes the principle of peaceful uses. We are now at risk because we have not only the space realities, we also have the Earth realities, and those realities unfortunately are not very positive sometimes. What I would like to stress, what is in our view, in my view as expert, and just a person you see just following these trends, what is extremely important to prevent the proliferation of the mentality, sometimes a confrontation mentality we might have on the Earth to the space. And the atmosphere of our discussion today shows that this is very important to save this atmosphere and to save this common wisdom of us, because things like space may be very crucial in terms of bringing this wisdom to the earth. I hope you understand what I mean. We had a very interesting discussion, for example, with our colleagues from Egypt, who put on the table a very interesting initiative to have something like a code of ethic norms for the future, supplementing our work as lawyers and politicians. And code of conduct for mankind, which would help us to stick to those principles. We think that it is extremely important for all of us to stick to this and not to involve not to involve our countries and our societies in something which would bring at risk the space as a sphere of cooperation, investigation. It should be kept for the mankind as res communis, as a sphere of cooperation and spirit of understanding and trust. So this is basically what I would like to, how I would like to respond to this. Probably my colleagues from other studios may also support me in saying this, just by acclamation or just by kicking or somehow. So in order to stress once again that we are common in these values. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we have a lot of questions we received through the web platform. Unfortunately, we have no time to answer all of them, but in my point of view, there are two that is very interesting for us as organizers and maybe interesting for other speakers. The first question is, do we have plans to continue such a series of conferences, open conferences, in this format for open discussion, not only for statements, representations, and so on? Because the main goal, as we said, is providing for better understanding, not limited only for official position. And the next question, will Roscosmos upload the recording of this event? Because many people who follow us through the internet would like to maybe revise or review again our answers, the questions, our positions, our views. And maybe you have your own answer, but I'll start with my own vision. We would like to have a chain of such events, maybe annually, maybe every month. It depends on different matters, financial, technical, but first of all, it depends on the interests our colleagues, our speakers, our international partners could demonstrate us if they are ready for such kind of discussion. And we have another possibility. Under UN COPUS, we could hold seminars as well, conferences, and it depends on us how we could organize those meetings, just like official session of COPUS and subcommittees, or in this manner, we tried to do today. Personally, for me, it just was as a first date. I was nervous because I'm not a professional TV maker or producer or something like that. So I apologize for maybe some inconvenience for you. And I appreciate your active participation in this conference. And with my gratitude, I would like to continue this discussion on all possible platforms. So if anybody of us have something to add, please, briefly. Ruben University.
Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I would like first of all, to thank all participants and all speakers and Roskosmos for this opportunity to participate in outer space talks today, because the theme of use, exploration, utilization of outer space resources is very important and very interesting today. We in Rudan University have two divisions, Department of International Law of Law Institute and Engineering Academy, which are looking for this process, and we are very interested in these aspects. And we have two questions, if you don't mind, all of these two questions to Mike Gold. First questions from me. I'm the senior lecturer of the Department of International Law, and my questions concerns the position of United States delegations in the framework of COPUS. And personally, I get the impression, maybe you will comment it, that United States delegation has twice standards or twice position, one on its national level and one in the international level in the framework of COPUS. I will would like to concrete it. From the one hand, you tell about commitment with the Outer Space Treaty, that it's very important to cooperate, but at the same time, the United States officials authorities show us and show all international community that United States don't want, because if we listen to the official recording of 2019 COPUS recordings, we see that United States delegations, for instance, doesn't think that suggested by Greece and Belgium delegations working group should not draft the possible and future possible international legal regime of exploration and utilization of space resources, and it should be only the platform for discussion, for sharing the views of different states. But unfortunately, and I'm afraid personally that we forget about the main role of UN COPUS, that only UN COPUS is responsible, and it historically was made that UN COPUS is responsible for drafting of international space norms, which all states should follow. But at the same time, if we look at executive order, April executive order, we see that in section 3, United States called for separately future drafted international legal regime. I would like to quote. It said that Secretary of State shall seek to negotiate joint statements and bilateral and multilateral arrangements with foreign states regarding safe and sustainable operations for the public recovery and use of space resources. That means that you don't want to talk and to try reach consensus under the umbrella of United Nations. Could you clarify what is the real position of United States, and do you want to try and to try cooperate with other states and maybe to start doing real actions in that connection, because all international community and we as researchers in the university see that this question are discussed during 5-10 years.
I apologize to interrupt you, but your question is so long that you left no time for Mike to answer. So Mike is not responsible for all U.S. Policy. So I know that Rudan University organized its own conference, overall international conferences. So you could invite Mike as a speaker to the Rudan. Mike, do not hesitate to go there, because it's a very great university. I could confirm it. So,
I'm happy to visit. Let me just visit during the spring or summer, though. Save the invitation for a little bit later. I've gone through a Russian winter or two myself during launch campaigns.
Okay.
But I'm happy to address the question. Again, we are eager to engage with the international community on the topic of space resources and the other challenging issues that are out there. And there's a lot of them. We mentioned space traffic management. We're entering an era where during every launch, there's not just one satellite that's deployed, there's hundreds of satellites that are deployed. And space traffic management, as we mentioned, is another issue that's going to require to be addressed globally and for us to leverage organizations like COPUOS, et cetera. I personally participated in The Hague and have been in many discussions with Giuseppe about the Moon Village Association. And I've already reached out to Steve Freeland, who's leading the COPUOS effort on space resources. So I can absolutely assure you that we will engage. We're even talking to universities and professors in the United States, and look forward to having conversations with yourselves and others throughout the world. And it's going to be a very important conversation. And just two other issues, somewhat related to your question, but also that we've discussed just previously. With the private sector, it's very important that we have national laws that begin with the boundaries of international obligations. As Nasser had mentioned, everything needs to begin there. But from there, also quoting Nasser yet again, I should pay him for every time I have to quote him, we need to take action to enable, to push this conversation forward, because we need space resources. We want to encourage companies and governments to utilize space resources, and we want more domestic laws in terms of how to implement both space resources and other aspects of the Outer Space Treaty. The Outer Space Treaty is terrific, but it's limited in that it's principles, and it's up to each of us and our nations to implement those principles, and then to take our experiences to the COPUOS and other forums, and then move forward together on a global basis. So I can reassure you that we will. And just one topic that hasn't been discussed yet, and before we end, I want to mention it, is transparency. I know this is simple, but whether it's space resources, small sats, or any other activity, the registration convention and ensuring that we know where everyone is and where they're operating is just going to be fundamental to avoiding conflict and preventing confusion. So I just want to emphasize how important that is. We're going to be pushing it in the United States and look forward to joining with all of you just to make sure that if we know where everyone is, we're going to have a safer and more peaceful world in the future.
Thank you, Mike. And we have only 2 minutes left to the end of our meeting. And I just have consulted with our organizers, with our technicians, and they said, and they assured me that all questions will be published on the website of a lot of questions.
No, I mean all written questions.
All written questions. And if you have some additional questions, you could write it down on the web platform. We will collect all of them and put there. And we expect you could provide us with your comments, with your recommendations for maybe future meetings, agenda items, maybe some topics, some visions, some points of view. And we expect those recommendations not only from our speakers and from all other partners all over the world, and we expect it from our young generation as well. And at the end of this meeting, I would like to thank all of you, and we would like your maybe evaluation. How you could say, should we use such format, such open discussion, and how you see the results of our first intention. Really, it's not the first one. The first one was taken 2 years ago. Then we held the first conference in Moscow on legal aspects of space activities and policy. But now in this format, in online conference, due to existing pandemic situation, for us it was more difficult, but my point of view, somehow we reach goals of our conference, because personally for me, more questions became more clear, and I'm more ready for future discussion on different topics. Thank you all, and I expect we could see one day personally at Corpus, at other international fora. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Spasiba.
Thank you. Bye-bye.